really be able to drive that value through the story, gain the momentum, and then start raising it and then doing it incrementally. So especially if, I'm not sure what percentage you guys are thinking of, but whatever, if you are thinking of a high percentage, thinking potentially doing in increments, right? Do a certain
Yes.
percentage, wait, let everybody digest, catch up,
Hmm.
and you move forward. So
Yes.
it doesn't become a big shock, especially for your regular customers, and potentially
Yes.
have some incentives for your regular customers as well.
Oh, they're spoiled. They have a whole rewards program, gay. Like they're spoiled. We have a whole Instagram, like elites know first, and they know when new things are getting ready to come out. Like we released our transition lenses, things like that for the summer. And they still get, lower prices for specific people, the specific demographics that have bought a
Good.
certain amount. Like they're spoiled. And we
You
did
got to take
exactly
care of
what
your community.
I know. And they know it too. They're like, hey, we're here
Well,
first.
yes, but this is where, we also be cautious, right? Especially for the new brands who are listening to this recording, to just always be thinking about cautiously, how much are you willing to give up from day one? Because that's the other thing is sometimes once we set the stage with too much of perks and the things that we give, it's almost impossible to take them away afterwards and retain the same customers. So thinking about how you're adding on the different types of rewards and programs, it needs to have also methodology to it in a certain sequence, so that and a certain volume of sales before you introduce the next one, so that you are able to gradually grow it and then without exponentially raising your price, because with every perk there is a cost associated with it. So you're absolutely right. Well, I'm really glad that you guys are all here on a call. We are live in 4 different platforms today. So we'll have questions that are coming in as well as we are broadcasting. But I'd love to start off by introducing myself and as well as welcoming everyone and thanking for you guys to be here, whether you're listening now live or participating. And if you are taking the time to listen to the recording, I'm really grateful that you're taking the time to learn. Um, and be able to hopefully learn. We can learn from one another through your comments. We can also be able to gain some great traction and conversation. So please, I do encourage leaving comments. Give me thumbs up so that I know this content is valuable, so that we can continue doing this every single month on the first Tuesday of the month at 11:30 Pacific Standard Time on a very different topic every single month that we cover, which could be found on our LinkedIn page at Yushkova Design. Today, we're going to be talking about merchandising excellence and optimizing assortment to maximize your impact. But first, I'd love to just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Evgenia Alexandrovna Yushkova, or simply Yay. I'm a fashion business consultant and work with large retailers to build their private label brands, as well as with the emerging brands to help them and guide them to build their foundation. So, to be able to establish them for launch and growth overall. My expertise is in private label programs, but I also focus on making sure that they're not just trend right, but also have the ground of the data and they're built to scale and they built to last. We look at the processes, merchandising strategies, we look at overall sales strategies and how to take it to market, what is the right way to do it, making sure that we have the foundation across the border from the process to merchandising itself to make sure that we set you up for success. In today's session, though, we are tailoring specifically to established brands who are in this kind of a stage between 10 million and up, or overseeing merchandising and assortment strategies of about 100 million retail operations. However, if you are not in private label or if you are not at that level, don't worry. This principle applies to any consumer goods looking to get smarter and learn to how to get to the market in a better way. So this content is relevant for even if you are an emerging brand. Curtis is actually one of the emerging brands that we are working with as well, and we're really excited for Curtis to be here. This is a networking event. It's not a sales pitch, so don't rush to drop off. It's going to be as collaborative and insightful as much as we're going to put into it. So please do send your questions in comments if you're watching live. And we are going to have also a live discussion with Dr. Mario and Curtis today on the call. I really appreciate for everyone who is able to actually join those calls. so that we can have a really interactive conversations instead of me just giving my insights and just making it into more like a lecture. Really thinking about the assortment and being the heart of the business. And when it really misses the mark, it's not just the product problem, it creates ripple effect across marketing, inventory, customer loyalty, really giving you to have huge impact on your profitability overall. If you ever found yourself second guessing whether your assortment is truly resonating with your customer, or worse, stuck with stagnant inventory while your competitors move products while you are not, and you're actually sitting and accumulating inventory that does not move. Those are the challenges that even seasoned teams experience. Happens in companies that start up, as well as large retailers who already have big programs and private label. There's still a lot of them who are facing the similar problems. This roundtable today is going to be our space to share the strategies, insights, and really ask questions from one another to be able to understand where can we take this and how do we move forward. Like I mentioned, this is absolutely not a sales call. There's no judgments here, and it's just really safe environment for everyone to be able to express their concerns so we can hopefully address them on the call. If I, for some reason, did not address your question on the call, then I will definitely get back to you offline and be able to make sure that I address it. So please do be encouraged and do send me your questions as well. We're going to cover today, how is it to explore our data to drive better assortment decisions and avoid guessworking. Next, we will also look at how to refine your product mix from the conversion, margin, and relevance. And then we will dive into brand cohesiveness and really thinking about how critical it is for us not to overlook the factors in our assortment to succeed. So let's really kick off with the data-driven decision-making conversation and how does that impact our merchandising decisions? One of the biggest mistakes that I see across fashion businesses who I work with, especially those that grow fast, is that they build assortments based on past performance alone. Or worse, based on creative instinct without really a customer validation, especially the brands who are starting up and don't have a sales data to back on. They often go and build brands and build assortments based on what the founder thought would be good for their customer without actually validation. Data really helps us in merchandising, not to just identify the opportunities to where we want to expand in. It also helps us to understand how do we actually form the assortment and what would be the balance of our assortment that is optimal for us to stay profitable as well as grow our margins over time as we start to build volume and demand. It means also setting up systems where the data informs your creative decisions and you are not designing in a vacuum. Now, it's not just the systems and AI tools that are helping us to collect the data. It all starts with really thinking about the hierarchy of what type of data we even going to collect, especially when you are just starting up. This is your clean slate. You are able to think about all the different hierarchy attributes that you want to collect on all of your products so that you long term over time can make better data decision better data decision data driven decisions. One of the most important thing also to think about if you are already an established brand, since we are really talking about to brands who are already established and trying to grow, what we often start to see is that you might have not been collecting enough data in the first place. So taking a step back and looking at your hierarchy architecture overall of what attributes you're actually collecting data on, or what attributes your team and at the product development level sets it up in your PLM systems, and how that data actually transforms into your sales reports, and so that you could be able to draw the conclusions. Do you have a central depository of data that helps you to then connect the attributes with the actual sales SKUs to be able to start going in more depth to analyze your trends, not just based on the SKU level or size level or color level, which is more of a basic hierarchy that everyone collects, but looking at more in the depth of the fabric type, of the style type, of the neckline, of the sleeve length, of the print direction, of the print style, of the print finishes. And as you can see, there's so many different hierarchies. And the deeper you go, the more you're able to collect data, the better it will be for you to make the better decisions long term and over time itself. Start by building also what I call an assortment health report, which really should include the SKU productivity based on what percentages of your SKU are hitting the target sell through within the season window. Gross margin return on the investment is going to be another important key that you want to look at. And are your products earning and keeping up, generating the margin relevant to their cost and the time on the shelf? Return rates and return reasons is another great factor to include into your assortment health report as you're starting to look at your data overall. Which products are coming back and why are they coming back? Is it a poor fit? Is it a poor quality? Is expectations did not match to what the customer thought when they were buying it, especially when it's online. Thinking about also looping in some of the feedback loop from your customer feedback that are leaving in reviews to your product. A lot of times reading just through those, you can find a lot of great data that could be captured and be able to be analyzed on this particular segment. Thinking about the segment performance, what does the performance look like across your key customer segments? Versus first time versus your repeat buyers, high value versus your discounted focus product. That can give us a really great story as well and to help us make a better decision as we're starting to think about what assortment we want to bring in. Cross purchases behavior is another very critical thing to look at. If you are currently not utilizing that, it's a big miss. The really important piece is to make sure that you also have be able to cross purchase, right? So you can cross sell some of the product either at the shopping cart or either at the product page when people are adding onto cart and tracking that data to see how it performs. A/B testing which styles are performing with combination of what styles when they either buy or trying to buy. Those are really key elements for us to be able to track and again make the decisions when we are talking about merchandising. Whether it's a merchandising when we are starting to actually just adopt the styles and build our assortment, versus a later on visual merchandising is how that product is actually presented, especially on your e-commerce stores. This data really enable us to identify your true best sellers, not just in sales, but also for the profitability and retention, which are the two very important key factors instead of just looking at sales. It helps us to cut and rework SKUs that are consistently underperforming. It helps us to cut out a long tail of SKUs sometimes, and especially when we work with large retailers and massive assortments. When we actually do this analysis, we find a long tail of SKUs and items that are not only diverting the attention from the customer, it actually also putting a lot of extra resources and stress on your internal teams to manage them. So sometimes by understanding of where that tail is and chopping it off will actually help you not just optimize your assortment and drive better sales. It will also help you to, at the end of the day, to elevate some of the pressure that you potentially have in the internal teams. And of course, it will help you to optimize your inventory planning and replenishment, which is the key. The better data leads to leaner buys, the stronger margins, and higher customer satisfaction. So really, we have to make sure that we understand that we do have the data, and the data that we have is in depth, that we can actually analyze and draw some of these conclusions. I want to share one of the case study with you guys. But before I do, I wanted to ask Dr. Mario, how are you guys are performing based on and taking the data and what type of data you guys are collecting in order to make this type of decisions and keep refining your assortment?
Typically, what we like to do with Incomparable is we look at what's being sold and what's not being sold within the last 90 days. as far as it was real seasonal based. So this particular go round, normally every summer, we place high emphasis on rose gold, yellow gold, and all of our premium acetate products within our eyewear. So we look to see like what's being sold within the last 90 days. We break it down like based off of a key point that you mentioned, the budget friendly pricing based off of like if it's a seasonal sale that we have, or if it's an insider's no first sale that we have. Look to see like how that's working. Like what dates should we put things on sale? Are flash sales working? And overall, we pretty much put that against our normal sales, our normal pricing sales, whether it's a first time customer, returning customer, how whether the percentage is looking like as far as them subscribing and buying something, or whether the percentage is looking like as far as them making a purchase without doing anything, as far as subscribing or just returning and not looking for a specific code, excuse me, or anything like that, or returning and just having that overall that FOMO aspect because everything is incomparable. Like I said previously, it's not mass produced. So that having a key role as far as okay, this is seasonal, or this is a slow return as far as maybe 4 or 5 particular watches and 4 or 5 particular pairs of eyewear. We're going to roll that out to our Elite Snow First group, or we're going to roll it out to our email and SMS group. And we're going to look at the SKUs and look to see the overall buyer urgency, like how many hours, how many days, how many weeks, up to 90 days. If whatever's not working after the 90 days, review it. And if anything needs to get cut, we'll cut it.
And have you know, I'm curious because this is really, really interesting to think. Have you ever guys looked at and or seen a difference between the styles, colors, or anything that you're introducing new? Which one out of those are actually attracting heavily new customer versus what styles and colors are gravitated by the customers who are returning? And is there a difference?
There's definitely a difference. Our neutral colors are definitely uh, a high precedent as far as new customers and returning customers. As far as our returning customers, they see more of an uptick after they buy something. As far as like our neutrals, our rose golds, our browns, tans, silver, monochrome, things like that. But whenever they return, they have that no like trust factor now. So then they'll try to delve into the yellow golds and purples with our very Perry watch, or rose gold and brown with our Elevate Link Mocha watch. So that we tend to notice that like they tend to really dip their toe in the water, what we like to call it, as far as the monochromes that are concerned, and then they'll look into the color dials, and the same thing with our eyewear as well. They'll start with our focus and obsidian black, and then they'll come back and they might look at the haze and the smoke violet, and or the manifested green. It's like that's where that whole I need to expand my color palette really plays a role. The season has a definite effect in that as well.
Of
Even though
course.
we primarily target premium modern minimalist buyers, but the as far as like the Christmas season, we have a lot of uptick as far as our browns. Not too much of our purple as far as like our haze smoke by to kind of give you an example. But our dusk and browns for this, that's a high seller for fall and for winter. But our color schemes, as far as like I said, like our haze eyewear, that kind of takes a dip. And another piece that plays a role is the geographical location too.
Hmm.
So we're stationed here in Texas, so there's a lot less I guess you could say discrepancy,
Hmm.
as opposed to like colors mainly based off of taste, based off of age,
Hmm.
based off of income. All that plays a role as well. So we look at all of
Absolutely. And I'm
those
glad that
things.
you brought that up. It, absolutely. Geographical aspect of it is really going to be important as well, right? Analyzing your data, not just on sales overall, nationally sales, but also looking at it by regions. Because you're absolutely right. This regionally, it will also give you a very different picture than if you're looking at it on a national level. The other thing to really think about, and as you were mentioning to prompt, it's interesting just to hear how your customer is behaving. Because one of the clients we recently analyzed, which was in a more of a kind of apparel brand, and they were all about more inspiration and inspirational quotes on their product. And interesting enough, their new customer was actually highly performing on, and most attractive for them was the actual fashion colors, which then they would then later on come back as a repeat customer and buy their neutral tones. So for every brand is very different. So knowing your customer and really understanding the analysis on that level and that depth really helps to make the decisions of what do you want to introduce as new, what do you want to expand on as to the people who are going to be also coming in and buying that product over and over again. And it will be very different for, as we could see from Dr. Mario, from another brand that we are, that we've worked with. Samuel, really welcome. Really happy to have you back on the call. We're talking about the merchandising strategies, in which right now we're really talking about how much in depth we need to collect data to be able to really draw the right conclusions when we start to build the assortments and we start to really merchandise our go forward plans.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry I was late. I had some other things come up.
No worries, no worries. We're really happy to have you. And I want to guys share another story with you with another brand that we recently worked with. Was a multi-brand retailer with one in-house private label division. And then despite their strong seasonal revenue, the brand was really plaguing on the high return rates and their margin erosions. Their buy plans were based on historical sales and really the internal hunch from the category managers. We were stunned when we received the information. We started really uncovering how they building their go forward planning of inventory. It was a little bit stunning for us that on that level of scale, there are still done certain things done in the hunch or in a very narrow vision of analyzing data. And we're really thinking about the merchandising and the planning team. They worked in complete silos. They really critical decisions were made way too late in the season because they were really waiting for the line review when everything was already adapted and ready to go and they were presenting to the whole company is when everybody would come in and start really strategizing of how this product going to go into the market. Now, it was way too late already. They should have done that at the very beginning, at the planning phase. And believe it or not, this happens more often than we think. So what we did is now when we start working with them, first we really built their dynamic assortment health dashboard to really help them to integrate their SKU productivity, their GMORI, return reasons, and margin contributing to the style color level. Then we took it even further and we introduced them to analysis based on their fabric type, on their graph, because they were really heavy in graphics. So we were doing it based on their graphic type. Is it a circle graphic? Is it a square graphic? It is a puff print? Is it an embroidery? So that they could also see and have a really clear vision and a depth level of what is actually really performing between not just their new customers, but also returning customers. And as we just saw from a few examples that we spoke with Dr. Mario, is that we see that each brand will have a very different data in those cases. It all depends on your consumer. So don't assume how they will behave. You got to validate it. So if you're a new brand like Curtis, validation of with the customer is going to be the key to learn it. Whether you do it through focus groups, whether you do it through pre-sales, whether you do it through flash events, whether you do it through surveys. I mean, there's many different ways to validate your product, but this is an important step in order for you to be able to draw some of those preliminary conclusions to make the right purchasing decision in terms of your inventory and assortment and where you want to move forward. Overall, when we did create this dashboard and of course trained everyone how to use it properly, we've seen that it reduced 28% on their carryover and markdowns over the first two seasons. It also increased them by 19% in gross margin through SKU level relocation. And the new cross-functional culture of data-driven decisions were adopted across merchandising, design, and planning teams. It was a game changer. We then also asked them to introduce their marketing team to be part of this particular powerhouse group that we call it. And it's really important that it was never just at the manager's level. We've always actually brought them in of the actual process driven people who's actually using the process and using this type of information to actually make the buys, which we brought in the buyers, we brought in the marketing team and outside of just managers. And that is how we were able to overcome this hurdle that they had for several years before they came to see us. Sam, I know you guys see a lot of that as well. I mean, do you want to share any story with our audience to see that they can see that this is a real problem?
Pretty much we've gone away from a lot of the old ways of planning our inventories. And if I've got a history, I can usually predict within 5% of the sales that month for what we're going to do based on the past sales of the colors or whatever. But we already know that 50% of any of our cuts are going to be in black. And if I end up with anything, I'd rather end up in black.
So you're making a very, very calculated decisions in this case.
You have to. You don't want to end up with purple and trying to get rid of purple, do you?
Exactly, exactly. Because you know that your customer responds to the neutral tones, and the majority of them, 50, like you said, 50% responds to black, which for some brands that potentially not be the actual piece, right? So that we might be a completely different story. And this is why brand validation and product validation with the customers is so critical to really understand it at the early stages. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's always going to be your history, and that's what I was basing on. But as far as if I'm going to end up with excess inventory and anything, I want it to be black. So I'm always going to overcut in the black. And if I need, I know that we're going to always have replenishment of black because it's always going to be your best selling color. So, but as far as fashion colors go, I look at those as liabilities.
Agree, 100% agree. In certain brands, I would agree. I would say the exact same thing. Michael, thank you for sending in the question through our live feed. His question is how often we should reassess our assortment. Best in class brands really run by weekly performance recaps during active seasons and deep dive quarterly to review them. The frequency really depends on your product life cycle and supply chain agility. So depending on if you're able to produce it closer you produce, then more often you will analyze your data. Now with the AI tools in place, we're actually able to almost do it in real time. And if you do have an agile supply chain that actually can manufacture within 14 to 21 days, that would be an ideal aspect because then you will actually be producing to demand. There's going to be no more build big bulk buys. And Sam is nodding because that is exactly where he's been preaching and trying to shift the industry towards, making sure that you're able to produce quickly and closer to demand. Sam, right? I don't want to speak for you, but
No,
I
no,
saw
no.
you
I
nodding.
didn't want to get into that earlier because I didn't know where y'all were at in your presentation, and I didn't want to contradict anything that y'all were already doing. But we don't really want any inventory whatsoever. And
Yes.
basically, we're focused in on on demand and then also repurposing of existing products. So we moved away from just basically creating product with the hope to sell it type of attitude because those days are over with completely.
They are way over. And this is where the models like pre-sales and things like that for new brands who are starting off also could be a viable source of where you can actually test your demand and actually get the orders to which you're going to produce against. And then at least it'll become less riskier, even though of course, you will need to overproduce to be able to support the new customers. So those are the there's many different strategies to do this. You just have to find what's the right one for your brand, and then make that decision and actually to stick with it and go forward with it, even though it's tempting to go and invest in inventory right away. I just came up with a call from someone and they haven't sold even one piece, but they're already sitting on a really large sum of inventory because they've been producing and developing, yet they have not sold anything and they're producing and developing already again. So, I mean, of course, my advice would be to stop creating, stop producing, get through what you already produced, start selling, and only then go back into introducing something new. So, really making sure that you are also not introducing too many new things at once while you still have not even gained the traction with your first collection, as an example. So, that's going to be another critical thing to think about if you are just starting up. Having the right product mix isn't about offering everything. It's about offering the right things at the right depth and at the right customer. So thinking about what we would recommend is when we start building and kind of thinking about what is the product mix of refinement and ratios really should be when we are trying to look and optimize our assortment and merchandising strategies. The rule of thumb really is, and it can fluctuate depending on the brand, but overall, especially for the apparel brands, we always say is to try to stay with about 60% of it should be your core items. And your core items would be your best sellers, high margin, high volume styles that define your brand. This should have a clear replenishment strategy and a really plan to market support. They're usually going to live season over season. You might with maybe minor updates. That's something that you can, we call it a bread and butter of your business. So figure it out what that bread and butter is and allocate 60% to it. Then we have to reserve about 30%. In some cases, I would even say a little bit less than that if we're gonna some because in some cases we do actually bring core even up to 70%. Then chase would fall in about 30% if you are on a 60-40 model. And chase really thinking about the trend aligned, mild risk items, right, with the upside potential. This will be monitored closely and can be replenished and drop based on early reads. This is where you would really want to have that agile supply chain for. If on the core items, you could still afford going into the traditional bulk model inventory and producing it at long lead times, which still not advised. But if you are already in that model, we understand you cannot phase everything into agile right away. You got to start somewhere. Well, your chase is where you want to be able to reserve that for that and really transfer that to agile supply chain as fast as possible so that you can produce closer to demand and remove that inventory. Now, when we also look at chase, when we work with our brands, we also look at that where why does it becomes less risk? Because it's usually made based on the core product that already sells well, meaning that we've potentially introduced a new fabric, but in this core style that we know it's going to sell because we know the fit is right, the product is right, the customer loves it. Now we're just introducing something new that they could potentially have a second item of or have something more exciting that's a little closer to the trend. Could be another where we might be expanding on a print selection on your core style. We might be expanding on your textures, on your colors, on your buttons, on your trims. So it's a minimal change from what you already know that sells. And what we do reserve for about 5 to 10%, depending on what model you are, for innovation styles and really category testing, where we can design with control investment and high learning value. You have to test because without testing, you will never find what's going to work in those nuggets that you can be able to grow upon, right? Think of the fire wheel. What are you going to be able to then be able to spin off of and really grow? So you do need those nuggets. And in order to get those nuggets, you got to fire the fire can, right? You got to try those out. However, you got to do it strategically and smart. Don't invest in your new styles. Do it on pre-sale model. Do it on demand model. Do it on a agile model. Whatever works in your particular supply chain atmosphere, this is how you want to do it. Try not to bring all these experiments with huge inventory that's behind it because you don't know if it's going to work. You don't know if it's going to sell. And having that ratio really helps you to build a strong foundation for your assortments so that you do not end up sitting with large inventories at the end of the season and have no idea what to do with it next. Sam, how are you guys? I know that you guys are working with several other brands. How are they? Do you see that this is a typical model that they use, or do you guys also have to educate them on this type of percentages often than you think? Sam, you're on mute.
Okay. With the tariffs that have come into play, it's kind of changed up the game plan for most of my clients. And we also are building factories here. So we're moving to on demand away from mass production. And we're using a lot of gray goods versus pre-dyed goods. So we're basically having stock in gray goods and we can dye to order, and being as close as we are to the resources, we don't have the time lapse that we had trying to bring things in from across the sea.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of elements that the advantages to having domestic production, but the disadvantage is we don't have the technology and the people that are skilled as they are in the other countries. So that's going to be the biggest issue going forward for on-demand customization. And a lot of
Absolutely.
the things that we see in the marketplace right now is recycling, circular economy are all going to play a major part in the fashion industry going forward. And these Gen Z guys, they're basically resale shoppers. They don't care about new products. And they're back like the 70s when you saw a lot of hippies creating their own style. These kids have created a whole different generation of buyers. And so you've got to really understand their whole philosophy, the way they're doing that, they're purchasing their goods, and then you've got inflation that's hurting new products. So you
Mhm.
got a lot of elements that you got to look at and determine what kind of products you got to make going forward. Because a lot of the times, inventory is a kiss of death.
Agree. Absolutely agree. Inventory is a kiss of death. You're absolutely right. And investing in it without actual validation is definitely a death of any, especially starting a brand. 100%
But
agree with you.
the biggest issue is when you invest before you know the history of the garment is number one, you could have a fit problem.
Yep.
You could have all kinds of problems that have come up, and then you've got that inventory. Because I can tell you about stories where we had necklines that came in and people couldn't get their heads through the necklines. I can tell you about periods where we had dyes that were not set and people were in the clothing and all of a sudden they were turning purple. So
Yeah,
there's all kinds of things that you need to be, assured of before you start making mass production of anything. And
absolutely.
and we used to be able to dump goods into South America, Mexico, and they put such heavy duties on everything. We can't even dump excess goods there. So, and you had a lot of retailers that you were able to sell your excess goods to in the past that don't exist anymore.
They don't exist anymore, and they're not taking the inventories anymore. You're absolutely right.
So you've got a whole different game that you're going to have to play the rules by. And the rules say don't cut inventory.
Exactly. Agreed. Agreed. I mean, I have a client who, I mean, Maya Knits, I love her. She's a great idea where they literally knit to order. Within less than 48 hours, you get a dress in your mail based on specific your body style. You just scan it with your phone, 30 seconds, within 30 seconds. And after that, you are 2 days later, have a box with your dress that molded to your body and it's all knitted to order. I mean, beautiful, right? Zero waste production. I mean, this is where we headed. And so the more of it we can see, then the more exciting it really gets. And I just can't wait for everyone adopt this scan your body and get the product in your own size, or at least get a better recommendation of the size so that you don't have to sit there and translate the size charts. Because again, people who are not in the industry are having a hard time to really understand what is it that they actually need to buy. And
And
so
with AI, it's going to cut out a lot of those issues that we've had in the past. And
agreed.
most people just don't realize how fast AI is taking over our industry.
Yep, for sure.
From logistics to production to whatever.
And
And
it's exciting.
your predictive analytics that AI can do, even just so you're saying on the fit. I mean, even on design. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the sketch where you can actually draw a sketch and then AI will create the prototype and
Yep,
then it'll also create the model so you can see your prototype on your model. And
yep,
it goes right
yeah.
into our, and once you get to that point, that goes into our factory. The factory then can take that prototype and develop the markers for it, which are then placed on our plotter, and it runs to our laser cutter, and the laser cutter will cut it to your exact size.
The future is fascinating. It's a little scary, but it's also fascinating.
And we're not talking about something that might happen. This is
It's
for
happening. I know this is it. We're living it. We're living it for sure. I mean, we are adopting more and more of it across all of our brands that we work with as well, for sure. And really, this structure, of the methodical way of how you structure your inventory, planning and assortment based on this percentages that we've just recently talked about, really helps you to mitigate some of the risks while allowing you room for innovation. But equally important, it's really clarifying the role of each product, right? It helps us to understand whether this item drives revenue or margin, or is this is really an acquiring new customer segment product that we need to have in order for us to be able to open up new opportunities and new customers, and if you are in wholesale, new doors. Or is it really more of a marketing or storytelling piece? And this is where it always comes in the nine box that you hear me always talk about. Anything that you build within your assortment, there always should be a definitive lane, swim lane, where you are actually within the market span. And then as well as by the rows of understanding where we have the good, better, and best, right? What is the entering item? What is your bread and butter item? What is your better item that where potentially where potentially where majority of your customers will sit depending on the brand? And what are those pillar items that people are actually gravitate towards? The attention grabber items. And those potentially might be limited edition or only produced to order, but they are necessary so that you can during marketing attract more audience, and at the end they're going to go and buy all of your other core product, but then you need to get them in somehow, right? So thinking about how does that help to tell the story? So with the cohesiveness of the assortment overall, it's going to be very important to think how that plays into its role as well. When every SKU has a purpose, your merchandising becomes a really growing engine, not just a guessing game, and it's not just done on a hunch. It really becomes something that really helps you to grow your business and grow your revenue. Product refinements, it's really not about just doing it by season. It's something that happens continuously. Many brands often say, well, yes, we're going to refine it when we're going to talk about fall and when we're going to talk about spring. But no one really, not many of them actually, in successful brands, that's exactly how they succeed. They don't wait for the season to improve or take action. They look at it on sometimes weekly and bi-weekly basis and make adjustments in what they're going to be in replenishment and what is going to be, of course, the next season to come look like when they are starting to talk about. They talk to their customers and they optimize weekly. So this is going to be very important, especially if you are at that level where you're trying to grow to the next step, is to really understanding how often are you actually looking at this from the merchandising perspective. One of the Sam, thank you so much for great question. I love when questions are coming in, so please do send them in. This really helps us to keep the discussion going. I really love that. How do we balance fast trends with margin preservation? That's a great, really, really good question. So, what kind of piggybacking on what Sam and I were really talking about is use small batch drops or capsule collections to really test your newness. Don't try to come up with a huge collection of new product. Again, just use a very small segment, right? It should be very small percentage out of your total assortment and really keep the core products and logistics optimized for the proven winners. And this is where it's really critical to make sure that your supply chain is diversified. You have the ability to transition from agile to bulk at any given point for especially your winning items. Because what often we would see is that if you have proven your product with agility and with print and with producing closer to demand, there might be a good reason if you know that the product is selling like hotcakes and it's a core item, it's going to continue living season over season. Then at that point, going to more of a traditional bulk buy might potentially make sense because you can then further save on cost and increase your margins. This is when we start to optimizing our margins. Or doing it vice versa, when you start to see slowdown of your core items, transferring, shifting them to back to your agile as manufacturing is also a critical step to be able to do it not just one way, but back and forth. So building that system, building that engine is a key and it takes time. So don't wait till tariffs go up to do it. Start thinking about it now so that you could be able to start building it and developing it with multiple different vendors with different abilities, modular production versus bulk production, and what their capabilities are. Try to do it in completely different regions, even though Sam will tell me right now we did that and it still failed us. But you got to do what you can do to be able to really protect yourself and be able to stay ahead of the game here. Sam, do you have anything else to add for our listeners?
Usually there's only about five styles in a company that supports 80% of the company's volume. And I've worked with companies like a Votronome out of Paris. We'd get 1,500 samples in a season. And of that, maybe 20 styles were the key styles that did 80% of the business. So it's never, you can do all the styles in the world. And the other thing you have to be careful was when the more styles you do, and when someone's buying a presentation to put on their floor, and one of those styles come up missing, because you didn't have enough units to do your production, because you decided, okay, I can only do so many of those units because we didn't get but maybe 10% of the orders we need to do a production run. So you deleted that style. So that customer didn't get that style. So they want to return the style that they bought to go with that style. So you have returns. So you're
Yep.
building yourself a headache if you don't cut your assortments tight. And your color assortment is usually where your diversity comes in, because that's where you can break down the colors in the smaller units, because most of the times the factories will dye a smaller unit per color versus per style.
You're absolutely right. I'm so glad you brought this point because that really takes us back to the next third point I want us to discuss on this call is the brand cohesiveness overall, right? And how do we really make sure that we don't over design it all starts from over planning, but then it goes into over designing because it was not properly planned. And then it just snowballs from there. Assortment strategies isn't just about sales, as we know. It's also about the storytelling. And it's exactly what Sam is talking about, right? Is to be thinking about this joint product line really confuses customer and dilutes your positioning. So to Sam's point, if you had a story that you were trying to tell and you took off one piece of that story, then the rest of the story is no longer relevant, which potentially will lead to the returns or low conversion rates. But it also applies to brands who are just trying to define themselves in the market. Curtis, this really going to be applying to you guys as well, thinking about, is your story, is your product tells a cohesive story across all your categories that you're introducing, or should you even introduce multiple categories? Should it just be just one category, be best at that, and then move forward? But thinking to make sure that it speaks to the same customer, it speaks to the same customer needs, and it tells cohesive story. The last thing that you want to do is to have all the different things, and customer comes in and they're confused. They're confused what your brand is about. They're confused what you're trying to tell them. You're confused what you're trying to have them buy. And a lot of times this pitfall happens, especially for starting brands, because we mimic what we see in large brands. But what we don't think about is the amount of marketing dollars and time and effort it took for them to gradually build to this breadth of assortment through across all these different categories, because they know that their customer is there and responds. And most likely at that point, they cater to multiple customer personas, not just one or two. But when you're starting, it will be shooting yourself in the foot if you're starting with more than one customer persona. Okay, maybe two if you have enough budget. Because for every customer persona, think of it as like a new marketing spend altogether. And it's a new assortment, or it's some sort of a new story that you potentially need to tell in order to be relevant. So picking one customer base and developing a cohesive assortment, let it be tight assortment, even if it's assortment with just one style, but in all the different potential colors or embellishments or whatever it is, even that sometimes is better than having multiple styles across different categories, because that just becomes a nightmare logistically, financially, and it usually will fail. Your assortment really should be reinforcing your brand promise to for every category, right? It's supposed to really feel catered and really feel that it's catered specifically to that customer with an intention, that it helps to build and solve that customer's problem or solve the void that they were not able to fulfill with other brands, right? Thinking about what's your unique selling value proposition to that customer for your product and assortment. Align your visuals, functionality, emotional touch points across direct to consumer, wholesale, social, email, anything that you do. It all has to say one cohesive story against one cohesive assortment. Let it be tight and small if needed. Now, if you are, since we are talking about more towards already established brands, in your case, take a step back and analyze your assortment based on 80-20 rule. That's exactly what Sam was talking about. There's always 20% of your assortment that drives 80% of the revenue. Everything else is just a tail. It's a tail that you're spending your time, money, and resources on bringing in and developing, and it also dilutes the traffic that already coming into you. And instead of them focusing on your 20% that drives 80% of your revenue, they've now spread out across this big long tail that is absolutely inefficient. So, and especially it's very difficult when you start to seeing that your marketing team is potentially spending the money on that tail end, when you actually should be spending money on that 20% that drives 80% of your revenue. So thinking about, go ahead, Sam.
No, I was going to just verify. I was just going to reinforce what you said, is that one of the things that I do with all designers is I set them down. And once they do their groups, I say, okay, now what's the minimum order per style? Okay, I want you to put all that on paper, do me a spreadsheet, and then total it out dollar wise, what that's going to cost to produce. And then take that and divide it by 3 months, and that's what your sales are going to be. Can you accomplish those sales in 3 months?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's really puts up a really interesting, like, oh my gosh, aha, no, how am I going to be able to do this? And that's if lucky if you sold it in 3 months.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying as far as the percentage of what you're selling in 3 months, which is obviously you're playing your markdowns in there on the front side,
Right.
but you have a certain amount of sell through. 10% a week is what we look for on the floor at sales. And if you can't produce that and come up with a profitable line, then you need to figure out how to reduce the size of your line and the direction of your line. So
Absolutely.
but you got to do it from the back forward, not just sit down and say, "Oh, that's cute." That's why most retailers get in trouble, especially new retailers. They come in and everything's pretty, everything's cute, and then they go back home with no open to buy, and they have all these good stuff showing up, and they don't know what to do with all these
And
good.
don't know what to do with it. You're absolutely right. And it's a problem, right? It's a big, big problem. And really also thinking about asking yourself, can a customer identify your brand from just the product line? Imagine you would never have to tell them a story. Can they look at your product line and say, okay, I know what this brand is trying to tell me. I know exactly what they're all about, and then I understand their purpose. If that's not the case, then you really need to rethink about, your cohesiveness altogether and how you're telling that brand story. Your products really do your products really reflect your pricing tier and the value position, right? Does your color really fit, or your silhouette strategy create visual storytelling? So, I mean, I want to leave you guys with all these questions just in mind as you guys are starting to think about everything that we have talked today. I know we came right to the top of our hour. I really hope that this was a really valuable discussion. I'd love to get more feedback and questions as they come in, as you guys are listening to these recordings. Please do give thumbs up or comments if you guys like this and want to continue to hear more of this type of content. It helps us to understand how to structure and what topics to discuss on the next roundtables. Really helps us. If you need to have a discovery call with me, it's absolutely free. There is a link in the comments box that you will be able to get, as well as Lisa will share it here on the chat. You're more than welcome to schedule it. I'm happy to sit down with you, look at your existing business, where you guys are at, and help you strategize and build some ideas and roadmaps. Really excited to see you guys all. I hope that you guys are going to join me for the next call, which is going to happen next month on the first Tuesday of the month at 11:30 Pacific Standard Time. And the topics that we cover for the following months are all on our company page. Go to the LinkedIn company page, Yushkova Design, and you will find it all there. Or you can just Google Gay Designs, and then you'll find it that way as well. So look forward to seeing everyone, Sam. It's really pleasure that you were able to be on the call. It's a great insight. I know Dr. Mario had to drop off quicker, but thank you, Dr. Mario, if you're listening in. Curtis, thank you so much for joining in. Just a few minutes. Curtis, was this insightful? Did this give you some ideas?
Yes, it did. It gave me a lot of, different views about, what I'm doing, and it's really at the right time in the here. I appreciate you guys. I really do.
Perfect. Well, we here for you, so please do join. You can, RSVP and add it to your calendar on a monthly basis. It's absolutely free. Come, and then we learn a lot through just the sessions alone.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. See you guys next month.
All right.
Right.
Bye bye.
Bye.